When you begin to step into your strength, and I mean really own it, something shifts in the dynamic with a narcissist. See, people who are rooted in truth, who operate from authenticity, they celebrate your power. But a narcissist doesn't see your strength as something beautiful. They see it as competition, as defiant, as a threat to the image they've carefully built, both of themselves and of how they want you to see yourself. And here's the thing no one tells you. When you grow, when you start showing up as the most unapologetic, most grounded, most aware version of you, that's when the narcissist panics. Because your power breaks the spell. They've relied on you questioning yourself. They've fed off your doubts, off the way you shrink to keep the peace. The moment you stop doing that, the moment you stand up and say, I'm not playing small anymore, the balance tips. They can't control you with silence or guilt. They can't shame you into submission. And when that happens, their mask starts to slip. Now, let me be clear. They may not say anything at first. They might even act like they're cheering you on. But watch closely. It'll come. The backhanded compliments, the sudden coldness, the dismissive tone, the subtle reminders of who they think you used to be and why. Because your light is blinding to someone who's only comfortable in the shadows. But you don't dim that light. You don't apologize for growing. You don't go backwards just to make someone else feel comfortable. You're not responsible for how your strength exposes someone else's insecurity. That's not your job. Your job is to keep going, to keep rising, to understand that when someone starts acting like you're the problem just because you finally found peace, it says everything about them and nothing about you. Listen, there will be moments where you'll question yourself, but that's normal, especially if you've been conditioned to doubt your worth every time you speak up, every time you set a boundary, every time you choose yourself. But that discomfort you're feeling, that's not weakness. That's not selfishness. That's the stretch, the emotional growing pain of breaking out of a toxic pattern. You've got to trust it. You've got to sit in it and say, I am strong and I am not going back. You don't need to scream to be powerful. You don't need to fight to prove your worth. Power isn't loud. It's grounded. It's calm. It's the quiet confidence that says, you can try to manipulate me. You can try to twist the truth, but I'm not buying it anymore. Your strength will trigger people who benefited from your weakness. Let them be triggered. That's not your burden to carry. What is your responsibility is staying aligned with who you're becoming, staying clear on what you will and will not tolerate, because strength isn't about dominating anyone else. It's about never letting someone else dominate you again, and that is why your strength is a threat. Because when you rise, they lose the version of you that they controlled, and when you stop needing their approval, their whole game falls apart. So don't shrink. Don't explain. Just rise. They won't come at you directly. That's not how it works. When someone with narcissistic tendencies sees your confidence growing, your energy shifting, your light coming on, they don't say, wow, you're doing amazing. Instead, they get quiet. Or, worse, they start playing the long game, the subtle game. And make no mistake, it is a game to them, a strategy. But it's not played with fists. It's played with words, looks, pauses, and silence that hits harder than shouting ever could. You'll feel it before you can name it. A comment that seems off, but you laugh it off. A slight change in tone when you're excited about something, and they suddenly go cold. You share a win, and they change the subject. You try something new, and they question your motives, your timing, your ability. Not in a way that's obvious, no. In a way that makes you feel like you're overreacting. It's calculated. They want you to second-guess yourself. Just enough to stall your progress. Just enough to keep you relying on their approval, their validation. Because if you fully owned who you are, if you didn't need them, they'd lose access to control, and that's their currency. Control, this is the voice you'll start to hear. Are you sure that's a good idea? You've changed, not necessarily for the better. Other people might not see you the way you see yourself. These aren't random thoughts. These are seeds. And if you're not careful, if you've still got wounds they know how to poke, those seeds will grow into doubt. And that's where the trap is. Because you'll think, maybe I am being too much. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe I should tone it down. You don't have to confront them. You don't have to argue. But you do have to stop internalizing their projection. Their discomfort with your growth is not your responsibility. Your job isn't to manage their feelings. Your job is to keep growing anyway. Here's the reality. When you step into your power, not everyone will clap. Some people will criticize you in whispers, with fake smiles, with just trying to help energy. You've got to be strong enough to see through it. And here's the good news. Once you recognize it, they lose their grip. Once you stop needing their approval, their tactics stop working. Because the moment you trust yourself more than you trust their opinion, the game is over. You're not too much. You're not changing for the worse. You're evolving. You're becoming. And if they can't handle that, let them stay where they are. You've got better places to be. This is one of the most disorienting things they do. The moment you start standing in your truth, the second you begin setting boundaries, speaking with clarity, or even just showing a little more self-respect, they flip the entire script on you. Suddenly, you're not the strong, grounded person in the story. You're the problem. You're the difficult one. You're selfish. You're dramatic. You're not who you used to be. And they say it like it's an insult. It happens fast, and it happens quietly. You won't even see it coming if you're not paying attention. You'll set a boundary, and now you're the one being cold. You say no, and somehow now you're the one hurting them. They'll twist reality just enough to make you feel guilty for doing exactly what you're supposed to do. Protect your energy and grow into the person you were always meant to be. That guilt, that's the trap. That's what they count on. Because if they can flip the script, if they can rewrite the narrative in a way that casts them as the victim and you as the villain, then they don't have to change. They don't have to look inward. They don't have to take accountability. Instead, they get to sit back, point the finger, and watch you twist yourself into knots, trying to explain or justify why you're changing. And the truth is, it's not even about the facts. It's about perception. They'll cherry pick moments, spin your words, and reframe everything so they come out looking like the misunderstood, loyal person who just wants what's best. And you become the one who's acting brand new, who can't take a joke, who used to be fun before all this self-help stuff. Let me tell you something. That moment when they start rewriting your growth as betrayal is the moment you know your strength is real. Because if it wasn't shaking the foundation of their control, they wouldn't be working this hard to distort it. And it doesn't stop there. They'll try to recruit people. They'll tell their version of the story to mutual friends, family, coworkers, anyone who will listen. Not always directly. Sometimes it's just little comments, seeds of doubt, concerned remarks about how you've changed. And now, not only are you dealing with the internal battle of trusting yourself, you're also managing the external perception they've engineered. That's the double bind. That's the psychological warfare. But here's what you do. You stay grounded in what you know is true. You stop defending yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You remember that growth doesn't always look graceful. Sometimes it looks like silence, like distance, like walking away from what's familiar but toxic. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that you've outgrown, just to keep their story comfortable. Because that's what this is, their story, not yours. And you're allowed to edit the cast list. You're allowed to outgrow the role they wrote for you. You're allowed to change the narrative, even if it makes them uncomfortable, especially if it makes them uncomfortable. They will flip the script, yes, but you don't have to act in it. Let them perform. Let them rewrite. Let them spin whatever tale they need to justify their ego. You're not responsible for the story they tell others. You're responsible for the truth you tell yourself. And the truth is this: you're not selfish for choosing peace. You're not the villain for growing. And you're not the problem just because someone else lost the ability to control you. You were fine when you were easy to manage. You were agreeable, you kept the peace, you swallowed your words and let them take up space. But the moment you start taking that power back, the moment you start using your voice, making decisions without their input, saying no without explanation, they can't handle it. So they do what narcissists are known for. They flip the script. All of a sudden, you're not growing, you're changing. You're not setting boundaries, you're selfish. You're not healing, you're overreacting, dramatic, too sensitive, not fun anymore. They rewrite the story so they don't have to look in the mirror. Because your evolution forces them to confront what they don't want to see. That they were never in control of you, they were only in control of the version of you that needed approval. So they twist it, and they do it subtly, with just enough doubt to make you question whether you're the one at fault. And that's the worst part. It's not loud. It's not some explosive confrontation. It's quiet, calculated, and meant to disorient you. You bring up how something hurt you, they say they don't remember it that way. You tell them you're working on yourself, they say you're turning into someone else. They'll frame your healing as a threat, your strength as aggression, your independence as abandonment. And if you're not grounded in who you're becoming, this is the moment you slip. You start shrinking again. You start explaining again. You walk on eggshells, trying to prove that you're still the nice version of you they were comfortable with. And in that moment, they win. Because the script they flipped starts becoming your reality if you let it. But here's what's really happening. They feel you pulling away. They feel the shift. And instead of rising with you, instead of looking at themselves and doing the work, they try to pull you back into the story where they were the center and you were the supporting role. Because the version of you that tolerated mistreatment is gone. The version that made excuses for them, that kept quiet to avoid conflict, gone. You're not that person anymore. And they don't know what to do with that. So they scramble, they lie, they twist timelines, they tell half-truths to mutual friends. They play the victim. Why? Because if they can't control the reality, they'll try to control the perception. And if they can't make you small again, they'll try to convince everyone else that you're unstable, difficult, not the person they thought you were. But let me be crystal clear. Your job is not to stay inside someone else's comfort zone. Your job is not to play along with a version of yourself that doesn't exist anymore. And it is definitely not your job to convince anyone that your growth is valid. It is, period. You're allowed to evolve. You're allowed to rewrite your own story, even if it means someone else loses their starring role. You're allowed to protect your peace, even when it makes other people uncomfortable. So when they flip the script, let them. Let them misrepresent, let them project, let them spin it however they need to. That's their coping mechanism. But you stay grounded in truth. You keep walking. Because the more you grow, the less their version of the story even matters. It fades. It loses power. And eventually, so do they. You don't owe them the old you just because the new you scares them. Keep becoming. They don't want you to feel empowered. They don't want you to feel clear, grounded, or certain. No, their goal is confusion, emotional confusion, mental fog, doubt that lingers long after the conversation ends. Because if you're unsure of what's real, if you start questioning your own thoughts, then you're much easier to control. Let's be honest. When someone is emotionally healthy, they communicate to connect. They speak to understand and be understood. But someone with narcissistic traits doesn't communicate that way. They communicate to dominate. They're not seeking truth. They're creating chaos. Because when you're in chaos, you're vulnerable. You're distracted. You're so busy trying to figure out what just happened that you forget to ask yourself the bigger question. Why am I still in this? Here's how it looks. One day they build you up, flatter you, say all the right things. You feel seen, you feel valued. The next day, silence, coldness, passive-aggressive comments. And when you ask what's wrong, they say, nothing. You're being too sensitive. Or worse, they deny the whole thing ever happened. Suddenly, you're spinning. You're reviewing texts, replaying conversations in your head, wondering if you misunderstood. That's not an accident. That's the trap. The goal is to make you doubt your instincts so thoroughly that you start leaning on them to interpret reality for you. That's where the power shift happens. That's how they pull you away from yourself, because once they have you second guessing your emotions, your memory, your reactions, they don't have to overpower you. You'll silence yourself. And you'll start to notice a pattern. Every time you gain a little clarity, they do something to shake it. Every time you start to speak up, they do something to make you question your right to. You bring up an issue calmly, they explode and turn the conversation into a completely different argument. Now you're defending yourself for how you brought something up, not what you were trying to address. That's confusion. That's a tactic. It's not always explosive either. Sometimes it's subtle. They'll contradict themselves mid-sentence. They'll shift boundaries. So often you don't know what's okay anymore. What was fine yesterday gets criticized today. What made them proud last week gets mocked this week. The target is always moving. And that's the point. Because the moment you stop trying to figure them out, you'll start focusing on yourself. And they can't afford that, so how do you deal with it? You stop playing the game. You stop trying to make emotional sense of someone who thrives in. You stop explaining yourself to someone who's already decided you're wrong. Not because you are, but because your confidence threatens their illusion of control. You anchor yourself in facts. You document things if you need to. You write down what was said, how you felt, what actually happened. So when the confusion sets in later, you have a map back to reality. Because that's what you're fighting for here, not just your voice, but your clarity, your ability to trust what you know and feel without having to filter it through someone else's lens. And most importantly, you remind yourself of this truth. Confusion is not love. In healthy relationships, clarity grows. You don't walk away feeling smaller, you walk away feeling understood. If someone repeatedly leaves you in a fog, if you constantly feel like you're walking through emotional quicksand just to maintain peace, that's not your person. That's not your tribe. Your goal may be confusion, but your goal is freedom. And freedom starts with recognizing that. You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. You're waking up. Stay awake. Keep moving. Clarity is your compass. Let it guide you out. No one escapes pain. That's the truth, especially when you've dealt with someone who tried to shrink you, confuse you, manipulate you into forgetting who you are. That kind of pain is personal. It's deep. It gets under your skin and whispers lies about your worth, your instincts, your reality. And it's tempting, so tempting to stay stuck in it, to replay every conversation, to think of everything you should have said, to drown in the why did I let it happen loop. But pain is a crossroads. You can either let it define you, or you can use it to build something unshakable, something honest, something powerful. Pain, when met with courage, becomes fuel. It becomes the thing that sharpens your focus, clears the noise, and reveals who you are when you stop performing for approval. And when you choose to face it head on, not avoid it, not numb it, but really sit with it, that's when everything starts to change. Here's the truth. The person who hurt you may never apologize. They may never understand the damage they caused. They might even rewrite the story so that they come out looking innocent. You don't get to control that. But you do get to decide what comes next. You get to choose whether their actions keep echoing in your life or whether they become a closed chapter that taught you how to rise. Turning pain into power means you stop waiting for closure from the person who broke you. It means you realize you are the closure. The healing doesn't come when they finally say sorry. The healing comes when you reclaim the narrative, when you say, this happened, it hurt, but it doesn't get to define me. It's ownership, not of what was done to you, but of what you do with it now. You take every moment that made you feel small and you use it as a reason to walk taller. You take every time you were silenced and you let it be the reason you speak louder, not with rage, but with clarity, with truth. You don't bury the pain, you repurpose it. You let it teach you what your boundaries are, what your standards are, what you will never settle for again. Because once you've been broken and put yourself back together, piece by piece, you're not the same. You're stronger, not harder, stronger. There's a difference. Strength isn't about building walls. It's about building trust in yourself. Trust in your gut. Trust that if something feels off, you'll walk. If something isn't aligned with your peace, you'll say no and mean it. And maybe most important of all, you start using your story not as a source of shame, but as a source of power. You speak about what you went through, not because you're stuck there, but because someone else might be. And when they see that you came through it, scarred maybe, but not broken, they'll believe they can too. So don't resent the pain. Don't deny it. Don't rush it. Learn from it. Let it shape you. Let it point you back to who you were before the world convinced you to settle. Let it remind you of your fire. Because it's still there. Under all the doubt, under all the damage, it's there. You don't get to choose what hurt you, but you do get to choose what it turns you into. So choose power. Choose growth. Choose to become the version of yourself that only this pain could have introduced you to. That version, that's your power.